The warning came without an audible countdown, without a visible launch trail on any regional radar screen in time to matter. Somewhere across the desert darkness of the Middle East, a two-stage engine ignited. Within seconds, a projectile was moving faster than most defense computers could fully process, a hypersonic glide vehicle accelerating past Mach 13, shedding its booster stage and tilting toward a forward command installation where American military personnel were working through the night. The target was not a bridge, it was not a fuel depot, it was a command post, a structure housing senior United States military officers, the kind of facility that sits at the nerve center of a sustained air campaign. When the impact came, it came without warning enough to evacuate. According to Iranian state media, when the dust settled and the smoke began to rise, 12 United States military officers were dead. The weapon responsible, Tehran proclaimed, was the Fattah-2, Iran's most advanced hypersonic ballistic missile, a system designed specifically to defeat the kind of air defense networks the United States has spent decades building and billions of dollars deploying across the region. This was not simply a retaliatory strike, it was a demonstration that the rules of modern aerial warfare, as the world had understood them, may have just changed permanently. Iranian officials wasted no time framing the strike in the starkest possible terms. According to Iranian state media, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, announced that it had carried out a precision strike on a command and control installation used by United States military personnel operating as part of Operation Epic Fury, the ongoing American-led air campaign launched on February 28, 2026. Iranian military spokesman stated that the weapon used was the Fattah-2 hypersonic ballistic missile, a system Iran unveiled in November 2023 and is publicly described as its most capable long-range offensive weapon to date. According to IRGC statements, the missile traveled approximately 1,400 kilometers at speeds exceeding Mach 13, roughly 15,000 kilometers per hour, and struck its designated target with what Iranian officials called surgical precision. IRGC spokesman claimed the strike resulted in 12 United States military officers killed and an unspecified number of additional personnel wounded. Iranian state broadcaster IRIN aired footage described as surveillance imagery of the impact site, showing a structure reduced to structural collapse. Thick smoke rising in a column visible across the surrounding terrain. Iranian officials stated the strike was a direct response to American bombing raids on Iranian military installations, and that the Fattah-2 had been deployed to demonstrate, in Tehran's words, that no American military position inside the region's operational theater remained beyond reach. The symbolism was not subtle, but the story quickly became far more complicated. Before we break down how the United States military responded to these claims and what American defense officials are and are not confirming, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the latest dramatic developments shaping global geopolitics. According to U.S. Central Command, the picture Iranian officials were presenting diverged significantly from what American military authorities were prepared to acknowledge. U.S. media reported that the Pentagon, in an initial statement, confirmed that a facility housing American personnel had come under ballistic missile attack and that casualties had been sustained. However, American military officials notably declined to confirm the figure of 12 dead officers that Iranian state media had broadcast. The Pentagon statement, as reported by multiple U.S. news organizations, referred to service members wounded and a number of personnel killed, without specifying rank or precise casualty count, citing the ongoing nature of operations and the need to notify next of kin. U.S. officials stated that air defense systems, including THAAD and Patriot missile batteries deployed across the theater, had engaged incoming threats during the attack window and claimed a partial interception. The degree to which those defensive systems neutralized the Fattah-2's flight path is a critical technical question. Analysts noted that hypersonic glide vehicles present a fundamentally different interception challenge than conventional ballistic missiles. A standard ballistic missile follows a predictable parabolic arc. Radar systems can calculate where it will land and direct an interceptor missile accordingly. A hypersonic glide vehicle, by contrast, can alter its trajectory during descent. At speeds between Mach 10 and Mach 15, even a modest course correction can shift the impact point by kilometers, and the window to recalculate and re-engage collapses to seconds. U.S. officials stopped short of claiming the Fattah-2 had been definitively intercepted. Between these narratives lies a complex reality that analysts are still working to understand. What does a Fattah-2 strike on a command post mean for the broader architecture of American military operations in the region? The answer is a great deal more than the casualty count alone would suggest. To understand why, it is necessary to understand what a forward command installation represents in the structure of a sustained air campaign. A command post of the type Iran reportedly targeted is not merely an administrative building. It is the hub through which strike packages are coordinated, through which targeting data flows from airborne surveillance platforms, including the E-3 AWACS aircraft, of which an estimated 66 to 75% of America's total operational fleet is currently committed to Operation Epic Fury, and through which battle damage assessments are processed. Senior officers present at such a facility are not simply administrators. They are the human architecture of the air campaign itself: planners, intelligence officers, targeting specialists, and commanders with the authority to authorize strikes. If Iranian targeting data was accurate enough to place the Fattah-2's impact inside that structure, it suggests an intelligence picture considerably more precise than many American officials had assumed Tehran possessed. The Fattah-2 itself carries a payload estimated at between 200 and 500 kilograms of high explosive ordnance. Delivered at hypersonic velocity against a hardened or semi-hardened structure, that payload does not require nuclear yield to produce catastrophic structural damage. The weapon was designed, from its two-stage solid fuel propulsion system to its maneuvering glide vehicle, precisely to defeat the layered missile defense networks the United States maintains across the Gulf. The message was clear. No command facility, no matter how well defended, could be considered a sanctuary. The immediate military reaction was one of compressed urgency across the entire theater. U.S. Central Command placed all forward operating bases in the Gulf region on the highest alert posture. According to reporting from the Atlantic Council's Forward Defense Tracker, approximately 40% of available American aircraft carriers are already committed to Operation Epic Fury, placing enormous strain on the Navy's rotational capacity. The USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the fleet's most advanced carriers, was undergoing repairs following an internal fire, limiting its operational availability at precisely the moment demand on the carrier fleet was reaching a peak. The USS George H.W. Bush was being considered for emergency deployment to compensate. Nearly half of America's mission-capable B-1 bomber fleet was simultaneously conducting strike missions from RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom, and an estimated 26% of all Arleigh Burke-class destroyers were operating in the theater. The system, in other words, was already stretched. The loss of a functioning command post and its senior personnel did not simply create a gap in the chain of command. It threatened to fracture the coordination architecture at the precise moment Iranian retaliatory operations were intensifying across multiple fronts. Regional governments responded with visible alarm. Gulf Cooperation Council members, several of whom host American bases that have already come under drone and missile fire, began quiet emergency consultations. Saudi Arabia and Qatar, both operating Patriot missile defense batteries, accelerated their systems to full alert status. Oil markets registered the shock within hours. Brent crude prices surged sharply as traders recalculated the probability of sustained disruption to Gulf energy infrastructure. Shipping costs climbed. Insurance premiums for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz surged. That spike in energy prices carries consequences far beyond the Gulf alone. European economies still navigating high energy costs felt immediate pressure, and Asian markets exposed to Gulf crude supply chains opened with broad losses. On the diplomatic front, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. Several European nations filed formal diplomatic communications calling for immediate de-escalation. Washington and Tehran remained simultaneously at the negotiating table and on the battlefield, a deeply unstable combination. President Trump, who had told reporters that envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were engaged in talks with a senior Iranian official, stated that he had instructed the Pentagon to pause strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure for 5 days. Tehran's foreign ministry denied that any dialogue was occurring, even as Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi stated publicly that this war was not over. In Washington itself, the political reaction was immediate. Congressional leaders demanded classified briefings. Questions emerged about the adequacy of force protection at forward command positions. The confirmation, however partial, of senior officer casualties in a single hypersonic strike opened a political debate about the human cost of Operation Epic Fury that the administration would now be compelled to address. Iran maintains that the Fattah-2 missile strike on the American command installation was a precise, deliberate, and successful act of military retaliation, that 12 United States officers died in the impact, and that the IRGC's hypersonic capability has now been proven in active combat conditions against the most well-defended military in the world. The United States military maintains that air defense systems engage the incoming threat, that casualty figures remain unconfirmed pending official notification procedures, and that the campaign against Iranian military targets will continue. Those two positions may seem like parallel statements separated only by numbers. They are not. Between them lies the central military question of this entire conflict. Whether American air defense architecture, THAAD, Patriot, the layered networks that have taken decades and hundreds of billions of dollars to construct, can meaningfully intercept a weapon traveling at Mach 13 or above while executing mid-flight trajectory corrections. If the Fattah-2 performed as Iran claims it did on the night of this strike, then every American military installation within 1,500 kilometers of Iran's launch infrastructure must now be reconsidered as a potential target. not in the abstract, theoretical terms of a defense analyst's threat matrix, but in the operational reality of an active war. The fragile equilibrium that had governed U.S. force protection doctrine in the region since the 1990s was built on a foundational assumption that sufficient warning time and sufficient interception capability would prevent mass casualty strikes on American personnel. The Fattah-2, if it performed as claimed, directly challenged that assumption. What was once a deterrence calculation based on layered defenses may now be a deterrence calculation based on contested probability. The cost of that shift? In lives, in strategy, in the willingness of the American public and its political leadership to sustain an air campaign at this tempo, is not yet fully visible. Will this strike remain an isolated battlefield event in a rapidly escalating regional war, or is it the opening demonstration of a new phase in which hypersonic weapons fundamentally alter the risk calculus for every American officer and service member stationed in the Middle East? Stay tuned for further updates as this situation continues to develop. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the latest dramatic geopolitical developments shaping the world.